And it's Amanda. So apparently I'm gonna do my video tonight with a cat on me. I apologize. I just wanted to take a minute to check in and write my concluding video for our research project. I was very excited by the data I collected and I'm really looking forward to talking to you guys about it. So going back to my initial research questions, I really wanted to know how social workers are responding to rural poverty and how social workers think we should respond to rural poverty. And I've kind of been thinking about my own rural community, and I created a second research question in my paper that says, what role does access to resources play in the persistence of poverty? So one interesting study that I had found and that really stuck out to me was done by Thompson about 3 years ago. And basically what he found was that not only is poverty an issue, generational poverty is an issue. So we're talking entire family lines where it's one generation after the next of experiencing poverty. So in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, resources must have something to do with that. So when I designed my research project, I decided to go with a qualitative survey. I wanted it to be geared towards people who either work in rural poverty, who have experience with rural poverty, who would maybe my classmates who had maybe even lived in poverty. One thing that I'm willing to self-disclose is that I grew up in a relatively rural area, and my family did live below the poverty line. So this topic was really true to me, and I was really interested to see other people's opinions. So I added a qualifying statement to my survey that basically just said, do you have experience with this? Now, one thing I wasn't expecting in my data was the fact that 3 participants chose to take my survey, even though they had no prior knowledge of rural poverty. And that's okay, I still included those responses in my data, but I also noted when in my results section that I did have 3 participants who did identify that they had no prior experience. So as a result, on one of my questions, there were those 2 of those participants chose not to answer the question because it was directly rated to or geared towards working with a rural impoverished community. So 2 participants, to reiterate, chose not to answer that question, but on all the other questions on my survey, obviously with SurveyMonkey we were maxed out at 10, all of my respondents chose to reply. So my qualitative survey basically was looking for word association. So when you hear the term poverty, what do you think of? Some of my participants responded poor or something that had to do with money, but a large number also responded that they associated poverty with a lack of resources. So in my survey, I tried to dig into that a little bit, and there were some themes that emerged out of that from my researcher-created coding. Basically, the responses that I got were that transportation is an issue, lack of adequate housing is an issue, and that current social welfare programs like TANF and general assistance and just community-sponsored programs don't work to meet those resource needs or fill those gaps currently. So in my needs for future research section, I really went into discussing the fact that it is a societal problem. Poverty isn't just in America, it isn't just in third world countries. It's a multi-systemic, complex social issue. And one of the things that I feel really needs to be addressed is these community-based interventions. A majority of my participants and in my literature review, some of the information that I reviewed, stated that coming at poverty from a community-based intervention perspective was really important. And when you think about it, there's a lot of power in community. Living in one of these rural, impoverished communities, when people come together to help each other out, I've seen amazing things happen. One of the programs that we have where I live is that 3 or 4 of the local towns have started a leave it, take it drop box, so they can put food in there, people can come and take the food that they need, they can later contribute when they have more resources, and it just goes back and forth, and the community is really banded together to keep those mini pantries in those communities stocked, and I think that's a really awesome, tangible response. Because in my paper, one of the things that I discussed is that we can sit here and we can talk theory all day. I think a lot of participants identified with using the empowerment model. We could talk about giving people cash resources, but at the end of the day, it's where can we meet those tangible needs as social workers? And I really think that is our role. And it's also our role to advocate for policy change that can impact some of those programs that were discussed. So if we look at offering cash benefits and food stamps and those programs aren't adequately meeting the needs of the families, what do we need to do to modify those programs or even replace those programs to see progress and to see change? On a community level, does somebody need to come in and teach the community about community organizing and how to get those grants and resources to help the community? Or is it more that the community is not even aware of the issue? Where I live, I think the community is well aware, and that's why these initiatives are taking place. But there is a possibility that some communities aren't really aware of the widespread effect that poverty is having on their local economy and their local culture. So one of the things I really wanted to address is how poverty isn't just about money. Poverty isn't just about resources. It's about shaping the landscape. When there's lack of transportation, that means that there's jobs left unfilled. When there's lack of adequate housing, that means that families are suffering and struggling, and maybe they aren't able to feed their kids, or they can't go to work because of childcare needs, or all these other issues that aren't fully explored. And also when I did my literature review, I noted that one of the other gaps appears to be that there's not a lot of research on specific resources. So how community interventions and the resources that they're attempting to provide, or even national or international interventions, and from a resource perspective, how are those programs working? How are they funded? Are they sustainable? That sort of thing. And that's really an area that hasn't been explored yet. So one of my